Okay, well, hello. Just by way of introduction, my name is Mark Lindsay. I'm the Head of Strategic Client Development here at Experian Marketing Services, and I'll be taking you through our webinar today on personalization in retail marketing, cool or creepy. So, for those of you that are not familiar with Experian, Experian Marketing Services very much focus in the retail area, and in particular, we provide a range of capabilities called the Experian Marketing Suite that we package together, falling into three main areas: identity, intelligence, and interactions. And during today, we're going to be talking about personalization, and personalization is one of those topics that really falls across the full suite, really making sure that identity, intelligence, and interaction all come into play. So Experian, over the last couple of years, has been building up a retail community, a collection of organizations that in the retail space that we work together with very closely. And we do that to share ideas and best practices and to get your feedback, but also to share some ideas that we've got. And most recently, we've recognized that there's a lot of hype and a lot of conversation around the topic of personalization. And so we thought we would run a survey, both looking at some of those retail organizations and what marketers are doing in the area of personalization, but also to try and get an understanding of what consumers think about personalization and try and bring those two together into a paper, which we mentioned earlier on. And so the idea of this morning's webinar is really to take you through some of the results and ideas from that came out of that research. So the first, I guess, set of information is no surprise really, and it is the fact that consumers are bombarded, if you like, with a significant amount of marketing activity, whether that be a number of emails that people are getting from retail companies every single day, their activity on social media, or the fact that people are still getting a significant amount of direct mail from retail companies on a weekly basis. And this really means that there's quite a bit of noise for marketers to cut through, but there's also quite a bit of noise for consumers as well. And that makes it difficult to really build up an engagement between brand and consumer, an engagement that can be effective and actually deliver results. So I guess the survey tells us that most of you and most of the retailers that we spoke to recognize the need for personalization to improve that engagement. Something like 52% saying that it is an important activity, and in fact nobody saying that it's not important, everybody recognizing that it is an activity that we need to invest in and we need to carry out. Looking at it from a parochial point of view, great to see that the UK is leading the way. 61% of brands are carrying out some basic personalization, so for example just using first names in direct marketing activity, and that compares with 50% globally. So I guess we can be proud of ourselves that in the UK that we're leading the way. But the other thing that the survey tells us is that it's not just about basic personalization. Of course there are lots of different elements to achieving successful personalization, and that's about using the data that's available to us, the information that's available to us. And when we started to dive into that in a little bit more detail, you start to see that lots of organizations are not using the data that's available to them. So only 9% of organizations using attitudinal data to personalize marketing, 11% using preference center data to deliver insights and personal messages, and we'll come back to that one because I think that's a particular lost opportunity. It's worth pointing out that there is a difference in my mind between explicit personalization, so where it is very obvious to the consumer that data is being used to deliver a personalized message, compared with implicit, where actually data is being used to deliver an improved marketing experience, but the consumer might not really be that aware that that's going on. And this is something we'll come back to, but it's important to keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about personalization techniques. So the great thing is that over half of you, or over half of retail brands that we questioned, have plans to be more sophisticated. So there's a recognition that we need to get a little bit better at the personalization that we're doing and start to bring in things like attitudinal and preference centers. So why aren't people doing that more? Why aren't brands being more successful in that respect? Well, of course, we asked that in our questioning as well, and what we found out was there's a number of different barriers, and these seem to be quite consistent across organizations. So internal resources was thrown up as a challenge, and that's a perception that most people have, that delivering personalization requires more effort and more complexity and more resource. And so not having those resources given as a reason for not progressing. Technology is important as well. And of course, most importantly, and the topic for today is really the role of data within personalization. And lack of accurate data is causing organizations a challenge when it comes to delivering engaging and personalized content. So that's a little bit about what's going on from a marketer's perspective. Let's have a little look at it from a consumer's perspective. So what do consumers think about personalization in the real world? Well, what we discovered, and I guess it doesn't necessarily come as a surprise, is that it's all about value. There is a value exchange between consumer and marketer, and consumers are happy to share their data and receive personalized messages if they get something in return. And that doesn't just mean discounts or vouchers. It can be about additional information, reminding people about events, or even just reminding them that they've got something left in their shopping basket after a browsing session. Can be useful, and people can see value in that and be comfortable with that activity. And this actually, one of the interesting things, and maybe we're all, as consumers, a little bit coin operated, if you like, one of the things that came out was if we were to capture date of birth and then use it to send a message to consumers to wish them a happy birthday, then 31% of consumers were happy with that. They saw that as fair use of data for personalization. Interestingly, if we were actually offering birthday discounts, that goes up to 53%. So it goes to show that people are willing to share data and receive personalized messages if they get something in return, if they get some sort of value out of that engagement. So the topic for today was very much cool or creepy, and it was one of the driving factors behind our engagement and this survey. And I guess if you did a survey and asked people about whether they felt personalization was cool or creepy, you might be disappointed to find out that there was not a lot of polarization. And in fact, 80% of the people that responded found personalization neither cool nor creepy. Now, maybe if you're running the research, you might have thought that that was a disappointing outcome. I look at it very differently, and I look at this as a really positive outcome, because what it means is that actually consumers see personalization as the norm. It's neither extreme. It's not something that's amazing. It's just something that they expect, and they don't particularly see it as being a creepy or scary or intrusive activity. So if there's one message I want you to take away from this webinar, it's personalization is something that is a viable tactic. It's something that you can participate in with good results. And consumers are expecting it more and more. This is actually a screenshot from my homepage from Amazon, and I think we're all getting used to organizations using transactional data to deliver personalized messages and personalized recommendations. I don't have time to go into explaining why I'm getting One Direction recommendations, so we'll skip over that briefly. But one of the things that Amazon does well is they're very open and very transparent about the recommendations that they're making. Because you purchased this, I'm recommending that. My belief is, and we see this time and time again, is consumers actually respond to that openness and that transparency very well. So again, something to keep in mind. Another organisation that is doing this well is a company called Finish Line, and Finish Line is a customer of Experian, and they've used data to do what I would sort of call implicit personalisation. So they took their default website and used gender to simply optimise that website for women and female visitors to the site. And then they took it a little bit further and started to actually optimize that, recognizing visitors who were mothers. And as you can see, they start to change the content, change the copy, change the products that are recommended. And this has worked very well for them, delivering something like a 14% increase in sales in the women's category space. So not using huge amounts of data, just a very small amount of data, but delivering a real personalized message and an optimized website. So one of the questions we're interested in is whether or not the message actually changes attitude, and absolutely it does. So depending on what message you're thinking about delivering will impact whether or not consumers see value in that personalization. Interestingly here, basically, if you're delivering a service message, the acceptance of personalization was much higher, 65%. So from a marketing perspective, it's interesting to see whether or not there are opportunities to associate marketing messages with service messages. Again, another takeaway. And of course, you need to earn the right to personalize. So if you are cold messaging without any relationship with an individual, then they will find it intrusive if you use personal details in an explicit way. So beware. Try and find ways of building brand and relationship before you start engaging with people on a personal level. They need to have that trust. Otherwise, as I said, the survey will tell us that they respond less well from that. And really that then flows into how people react to communications that are not on message or appropriately based. So we can see here that consumers are put off by poor use of personal details, and they think less of the brand when personal details are used incorrectly. And this can lead to a bit of fear around use of personalization. So we're going to come on to some methods for addressing that. So one of the methods that I recommend is if you don't have the data that you need to deliver a positive personal message to your consumer, think about asking them. This is actually an example from The Guardian, and The Guardian, whenever there was the royal baby story running, found that some of their consumers, some of their readers, weren't actually that interested in the royal family. And so what they did is they asked them, are you a royalist? And if you weren't, provided an opportunity to turn off that content. There's no way of them getting that data in any other way other than asking the consumer. So that's what they did. So it's something not to be afraid of. It can be very powerful. And in fact, what we're seeing in the marketplace, and particularly in retail, is lots more examples where retail organizations are asking consumers for really quite personal data to help make recommendations and deliver personalized products. So again, our consumers are getting familiar with this concept and getting more comfortable with sharing this sort of data as long as they see something in return. And then I mentioned preference centers earlier on. Preference centers are critical these days because it's your opportunity to ask and get permission to communicate through particular channels. But whilst you're there, why not also find out what their preferences are product-wise, or frequency of message or type of message. So I think preference centers are going to grow dramatically as we move forward as an opportunity to really engage with people and understand what their personalization preferences are. And then finally, before we make some closing recommendations, don't forget about channel. This is an example from Nectar, where they ran a personalized campaign over a number of weeks and tried personalization in different channels. And what they found was the more one-to-one the channel, so SMS, for example, the more they were able to personalize the message, and actually the better results they got in terms of engagement. So there are channels where more personalized messages are possible, and others where you're more in a broadcast situation and you can't be sure who's looking at the message. You need to build this into your personalization plans, because otherwise one approach across all channels doesn't necessarily work. So just to wrap up, what we're going to do is we're going to take you through a few concepts that we'd like you to remember about getting personalization right. And what we've done is created a little formula for success. So for the mathematicians amongst you, hopefully you'll like this. But essentially, it's great personalization comes from understanding the context, making sure that you understand insight and data, making good decisions, and then a real sort of icing on the cake is to optimize all of that using optimized capability. So just to run through that briefly, the context, well, that's about understanding the consumer, what journey they're on, and putting them at the heart of your engagement. On the insight side of things, it's about collecting and utilizing data to deliver the correct message. Our survey said that actually quite a few brands are not confident. In fact, only 13 or 14% of respondents said that they're very confident in the data. This is a real issue when delivering personalization. So there's a few techniques that you can use, improving your single customer view, carrying out progressive profiling, and there's another report on that from Experian that you can have a look at, or the use of data modeling to fill gaps in your data. And don't forget to ask. Decision making is also really important. I think a lot of people, when it comes to personalization, don't really fully make a decision about where we are in the journey and what type of personalization is required. This is actually a screenshot from our interactions manager solution, and just illustrating, making sure that you think about the whole journey and decide what messages to deliver at which point. And then finally, I mentioned optimization. The complexity of all the products we have as retailers, all the channels, all of the differences in every consumer mean that actually getting the right message and getting the right decision is quite challenging from a human perspective. And so what we've seen in a number of cases is applying technology, and this is not a retailer, but it's an example that we've seen recently of applying optimization technology, in this case market switch from Experian, to understand what's the best message, what's the best personalized message to deliver at any point in time. And they've seen huge results, huge improvements in results from actually implementing an optimization approach to personalization. So to finish up then, I guess to summarize, the big message for me is, yes, some consumers find personalization cool and some creepy, but the vast majority of consumers out there are starting to expect it and treat it as the norm. You should have confidence that actually personalization can give you great results, but you need to make sure data is accurate and make sure that personalization is right for your brand, your industry, and actually the specific message that we'll be delivering at that point in time. So definitely, I hope that information has been useful to you, and I hope that you're in a position where you can look and make sure you're adding value with the personalization you're implementing and delivering. And of course, we're very happy to support in that. So if there's anything we can do to review or to improve your own personalization activities, do let us know. And so with that, what we'll do is we'll just stop there and see if there are any questions now that have come in. Yeah, if you want to type them in, we'll have a look there. And it looks like we've got a couple on there, which is great. So thanks for sending those through. Yeah, bit of a one here talking about, so where, it sounds great, but where do we start? Well, obviously there's an element of it depends. In different organizations will be in different places, but I'd probably go back right to the beginning of what I was saying in terms of thinking about the data that you have in place that you can use for personalization. So, do you actually have the necessary data? Is it of the necessary quality to enable you to start identifying opportunities for personalization? So definitely a starting point, I think, is looking at your data and your data coverage. And then I think very quickly after that is looking at customer journeys. Where are the opportunities for personalization, and where does it deliver the best messages and the best results? So of course it will depend on your own organization's maturity and objectives, but that would be my recommendation of the first two starting points. And we've also got another one here, so a very short one. Is it expensive? Well, personalization doesn't need to be expensive at all. And I go back to what I mentioned about implicit and explicit. There are lots of quick wins around personalization that just require a subtle improvement in the marketing message based on the information that you've got available to you. So this is not about delivering more messages. It's not about delivering more expensive messages. It's just about delivering the right ones. So there are plenty of things that you can do without it being very, very expensive activity. And going back to that, where do you start? Getting your data right and joining data together doesn't need to be an expensive activity. And then we've got a question here. So where do you strike the balance of personalization between who the customer is and what they do? So looking at the difference between demographics and behavior. And that's a great question. The reality is, if you can, you want to combine both of those. And the example that I always use is looking at behavior and looking at somebody that's browsing a Ferrari website does not mean that person is in the market for buying a Ferrari, because what you need to do is look at the demographics and discover that it's actually a student with a penchant for fast cars, and in fact doesn't have the wherewithal to buy a Ferrari. So it's a combination of behavior, that website activity, and the demographics, their affluence and age, etc., that gives you the opportunity to deliver the killer message and killer personalization. The challenge, there's two challenges. One is sometimes the data isn't available, and the other challenge is linkage. And we do a lot of work in the linkage area, because how do you link anonymous behavioral data with identified demographic data? And that's probably the topic for a whole another webinar. But there are techniques there that you can do to link, for example, cookie activity through into personal information and demographic information, so that you can start to make decisions around the interaction between behavior and demographics. And of course, there's lots of technology such as DMPs that can help with that side of things. So I think there are a few other questions, so apologies, but I think what we're going to have to do is leave it there, because we've run out of time, unfortunately. I'd like to thank you again for joining. I hope that it's been useful and informational for you. And as I said, we will follow up with any questions that we haven't had a chance to get to. And also, if you have not got hold of your report from the handout section, we will follow up and get that information to you, so that you can browse that information at your leisure. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.